Hey guys, welcome to today's Java tutorial. Today we're going to be doing exercise 2 from week 3, HiCounter. So write a Java program called HiCounter that prompts the user to enter an arbitrary sentence. Count the number of times the string hi appears in the sentence and display the result on screen. The string hi can be written in a combination of upper and lowercase. Okay, so this one's pretty hard actually. The first thing you have to know how to do is, well, I just put in our scanner, and so it's this little block here is just scanning the user input. I wasn't bothered typing it out for everyone again because I'm sure you probably know how to do it by now. So the first thing we need to know how to do, or what to do, is how to use a for loop. So the Java for loop is pretty straightforward. So how it works is you initialize a variable, let's say I, and you give it a value of, let's say, 1, and then you have your condition. So let's say I is greater than or I is less than or equal to 1 or equal to 2, and then we increment I, so we say I plus plus, and then while the condition is true, it'll print out any statements in here. It's realistically only used when you know how many times you want to loop. So in this example, we do know how many times we want to loop because we wanted to loop through the entire string. So what does it look like? So like I said, you declare your variable, so I is equal to 1, then we're saying I is less than or equal to 2, and then I plus plus. So it will come down, it will say, okay, well, I is less than or equal to 2 because it has a value of 1, so we'll print out runs plus 1, so we'll print that out first time. Then it will come back up and it will add 1 onto I, so now I is equal to 2, and then it will check the condition, and it says, okay, well, 2 is less than or equal to 2 because that's true, so it will run it again, and it says runs 2, and then it comes back up and it adds 1 onto I again, and I is now equal to 3, which is not less than or equal to 2, so it breaks out a loop. Okay, so the other thing we need to use is a substring. Just to go through substrings again really fast, we use a substring to break up a string. Now, we're only taking a part of a string when we use a substring. We're not breaking it into 2 parts, we're just taking part and assigning it to a new variable. So, in this case, we'll be checking the number of times the string is in, or number of times the substring is in a sentence. So, this is just how we declare our substring. And just to explain down here, okay, so the first thing we do is we declare a data type, so it's a string. Then we're going to give it a variable name. Then this is the variable name from our string, which we're taking the substring of. So this would be like my string, and then this would be like my substring. And then the substring methods, we just put that in here with a dot before it. And then the 2 numbers are very important. So the first number is where we want the index we want to start from. So let's say the word is hello. The first letter H has an index of 0, and the second letter E has an index of 1. So this will go from H to 1, and it will take the letter H. So it goes every letter up until this point, but not including this point. Okay, that's a very important point to note. Not including this number. Okay, so here's just a little example. So my string, hi, my name is Hillary, so this is just this string here is assigned to the variable my string, and then string my substring equals my string dot substring 0, 1. So what this will do is it will say, okay, well, the variable my string, which is here, contains hi, my name is Hillary, so we want to take take the substring 0, 1, which will be the first letter H. So this returns this returns H as a substring assigned to the variable mySubstring, which is over here. Okay, pretty straightforward. And then finally, just another little example. Okay, so we have I've done this in a previous video, can't remember which one, but remember the length of a string is the number of its final index plus 1. So there's 5 letters in this word, which means the length is equal to 5. But the index of the last letter is 4. Okay, so we just add 1 onto that to get the length. Or we can use the length method, or we can, if we have the length and we want to iterate throughout the loop, we'll just take away 1, and we'll see that in a few minutes. So there's a couple of things that we need to try to figure out how we're going to do before we start our program. So we're asked to go through a string. So let's just say our string is going to be hi, my name is Hillary, and we need to find the number of times hi appears in that string. So the first thing we need to do is we're just going to write in some pseudo. So we're going to say count number of times hi appears. Okay. We're also going to use a loop, so we're going to use a for loop for this. And we know that when we use for loops, we should always use variables like I or j, just to break up our as our variable for our loops. So I'm going to use I. I'm going to give it a value of 0, and the reason I'm giving it a value of 0 is because that's the first index. Okay, that's the first index of the first number of the first position of the string character. Okay, and our second one is going to be, okay, so if we start writing our while loop while we're doing this. So for, now I want to say, well, declare it first int equals 0. Okay, so we have this done. Now what we need to do is we need to say, okay, well, we know the length of the string, we know how to get the length of the string, but we need the last index. So we're going to say, okay, well, while it's going through, it'll go through our program from the 0, and it will go through each group of 2 strings, and it will say, okay, well, do these 2 contain hi? And if not, then it'll go to the next 2, and it will say, well, do these 2 contain hi, or make the word hi? If not, go to the next 2, do these 2 contain hi? And that's how we're going to get this program to work. So we come back here, and we're going to say, okay, well, in order to do that, we need to say, okay, well, our starting point is going to be 0, and our end point is going to be 4, because that's the total number of the index. That's the index, the last index. So we need to say, okay, well, if I is equal to 0, then the end of our condition is going to be 4. Okay, but in our case, it's going to be whatever the length is, because we don't know how long the string is they're going to enter. So we need to say, okay, well, we know that I is going to be 0, because that's the first index. And then we're going to say sentence, which is what they enter, dot length minus 1. Now what this does is it says, okay, well, the string is sentence. The string that they enter is declared to the variable sentence. So we're going to get the length of that, and then we're going to take away 1 from it. So, like I said before, the length minus 1 is the same as the last index number. So our for loop is going to go and say, okay, well, while I is less than the length of the sentence, which is 4 in this example, then keep executing our statements, which we'll do now in a second. And finally, in the last part of our for loop, we have to increment it. So we're going to say I++, and what that means is it will add 1 onto I every time the loop iterates. So now that we have our for loop done, we need to find a way of determining if the numbers, or if the characters in the string equal to high. So how we're going to do that is we need to say, okay, well, if our sentence, which is the string they enter, if the substring of that, substring, and we're going to give it the values of I and I plus 2. Now the reason we're giving it the values I and I plus 2 is because we're going to go through our for loop and I is going to automatically be incremented. So it's going to say, okay, well, the first time I is equal to 0, and then it's going to add 2 onto I. So if we come back here, we can see, okay, well, here's 0, and then it's going to add 2 to 0, so it's going to now become 2, but it uses everything up until 2, but not including 2. So it's going to take the first 2 characters of the string. Then what we need to do is we need to say, okay, well, we're going to use a different method here. We're going to say equals ignore case, and then we're going to put in our string high. And what this does is it says, okay, well, if these two characters that we get from in a substring, if they contain high, well, we want to ignore the case, whether it's uppercase or lowercase, so it'll still be evaluated true, this whole condition. Okay, so if this whole condition evaluates the true, then we want to say, okay, well, we're going to need something else in here. So just before our for loop, we're going to declare a variable called counter, and we're going to give it a value of 0. So in here we're going to say, okay, well, counter, we're going to use the variable counter to count the number of times that our string, our substring, finds the word high, whether it's uppercase or lowercase. So we're going to say, okay, well, counter plus plus. Now what this will do is it will add 1 onto counter every time this condition is true in our for loop. Okay, so then outside our for loop, I'm going to say system.out.println, and I'm going to print counter. So just to run through it again, we've got a variable called I, which is equal to 0, which is the same as the first character or first index. So while I is less than the length of the sentence which they enter minus 1, which is the same as the last index value, we want to say, okay, well, then if that's true, then we want to say, okay, well, we need the substring, which is the same as the first letter. We want a substring of the first letter and the next two, and the next one, sorry, and we want to ignore if it's uppercase or lowercase, and then we'll add 1 onto that. Our loop will then come back, and it will add 1 onto I, so now I is equal to 1, and then we're saying, okay, well, we have I is still less than the length of the sentence, so we'll execute the statement again. So we want to say, okay, well, I is now equal to 1, so I plus 2, so I is now equal to this I is now equal to 3, but not including 3, so it'll take 1 and 2 instead of 0 and 1 this time, and it will check if it contains hi in uppercase or lowercase, and it will add 1 onto the counter if it does. So let's save and run this, see what we get. We get an error, getting a real funky error. Doesn't like something. What doesn't it like? Well, it doesn't like the fact that I spelled sentence wrong 2 times, like an idiot. So we'll save that, run it again. Okay, still doesn't like it. Okay, why not this time? Length. Okay, so I honestly can't tell you what went wrong there. I just had to copy the file to another location. I don't know, the class file was corrupted if somehow. So anyway, it runs anyway. Let's just run it again. Terminate the old one. Okay, so run it. Okay, so it's asking us for a string. So we'll enter a sentence. We'll say, hi, my name is Hillary. Okay, so the number of times hi is in there is 2. Perfect. We have both upper and lowercase. Okay. Thanks again for watching the videos, guys. If you have any trouble with this, like I did with the class, maybe leave a comment down below, and you can let me know your troubles as well. Alright, thanks. Bye bye.